And so this is kind of the takeaway picture that I like to show that like embodies our sort of architectural diagram, right? I mean, we sit at the center, and on this side you have the university community, and then on this side you have sort of K-12 teachers, students, and out-of-school providers. And what we try to do is sort of flow and connect the resources, but also collate and collect the ideas and the needs and bring it back in a way that's sort of a more systemic, bi-directional communication, as opposed to that FedEx guy just heaving stuff into the classrooms without regard to, does anybody want it, does anybody need it, does it align with what you're doing, and also just to kind of be that Google translator, if you will, between this sort of strange language that happens in classrooms and the strange language that university people talk. So let me go through this. This is kind of like how we try to position what the value of a center like OSAP is overall. And there's sort of three different ways that I try to chop that up. And again, this is skimming over at a pretty high level, so we can certainly talk about any of these in more detail. What's the value to the institution? What's the value to the faculty individually? And also, what's the value to the broader community, which I think is the easiest kind of one to articulate. So I would say, top line, it helps you be more competitive for funding, because at least with NSF, you're required to put in some kind of broader impact statement about what you're going to do. It's not going to win you the proposal, but if it's close, it might actually lose you the proposal. And certainly the evaluation of that section is getting ratcheted up pretty significantly now. You can't just sort of slap something together and hope it will pass muster. We also do a lot to increase the productivity of proposal development, because we can kind of offload that whole chunk from the PI, who's got his or her hands already pretty full writing the rest of it and organizing the rest of it. So just like your Office for Research Development might support other aspects of proposal development, we can do that as well. We also do a pretty good job of attracting new sources of funding that are more K-12 focused. A lot of the folks on campus don't think about K-12 because they're like, well, we're just undergrad and grad, and so if you look for funding programs, that's just completely a blind spot. And they're all often local foundations, corporate foundations, other sources that want to target kids, and they don't normally think of the university as a place where that would happen, and now it can. This is sort of an easy one in the sense that the university does a lot to engage with the community, and this is a sort of a key anchoring way to do that. Obviously, it helps to put some positive publicity about what the university is doing in terms of giving back and supporting the local community. To the extent that you're reaching out into the K-12 schools that send students here, you can do a good job of trying to attract more diverse undergraduates into your STEM majors, which is often a priority for the university. And also, to the extent that this is a priority, you can also get some of the really top students to become very familiar with, say, departments on campus and really see themselves as wanting to stay here and go here rather than other places. One of the things that we did that I thought was really important was ended up aligning with our strategic plan at the university. So we put out a strategic plan every 10 years or something like that. And here's the language that, some of the language in there about expanding our influence and effectiveness through strong partnerships with Chicago area institutions, contributing to Chicago's reputation, and participating in and improve the lives of civic communities. Couldn't find the language that you guys had, but I'm sure it's somewhere on your the president or the provost website, and to the extent that you're aligning with what the mission of the university is and what the plan is, I think that ends up strengthening how you can communicate what the value of your efforts are. And so this is sort of the areas that we do, and we actually end up in little brochures that the university sends out sometimes when they say about what a great place we are. They say, well, look at all the great things we're doing in schools, and then they end up calling us and saying, what can we put in the brochure this time? And we give them some stuff. And so that, it's little stuff, but it adds up over time. So in terms of the faculty, again, we go back to this idea of increasing their competitiveness, which is something that they value highly. We help bring that credible education expertise to their broader impacts. I think importantly, back to the idea of like how time-consuming the idea of partnership formation is, it's pretty unreasonable to expect a faculty member who's got a lab and everything else to have time to develop these networks of partnerships in schools. That's just not core to their activity. And so the fact that we already have these and we can bring them to the table really helps smooth that out, because we can tell them right away, oh, if you're doing nanotechnology, we know a high school that's doing nanotechnology, they would love to partner with you, whereas that might be completely opaque to faculty members. And finally, we'll talk about this more too, but the amount of budget that they might allocate to these outreach activities is always kind of squeezed off to the margin because they want to fund their grad students and lab equipment and everything else. But we can be a lot more effective because we already have that infrastructure running, and so they don't have to spool it up from scratch. We know how to do a lot more for a limited amount of money. So we're just a lot more efficient. One of the things that we also do, not every office does this work. For example, at Missouri, they only do the proposal development side. They do not do post-implementation, but we do a lot of this. So when the award comes in, we'll have our staff actually develop and run the Broader Impacts program in partnership with the faculty. So we can actually be that sort of turnkey outsourced provider to help faculty do that work if they want, or to the extent that they want, or support their grad students. Yeah?
So is there, so how is that paid for essentially, that part?
Through the grant.
Through the grant. So
Yeah.
you basically put it in the budget.
Yes.
So is there about a piece that comes
That's right.
from the OSAP that you
Exactly.
manage?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly right. It's never a big enough piece of the budget, but
Sure.
but no, that's exactly how it works, and that's something that, depending on how important it is to that faculty member, or if there are specific requirements. You guys don't have engineering here, so the example that when you do the largest NSF programs are called engineering research centers, which are these $20 to $25 million 5-year huge multi-institutional centers, and they actually spell out, like, you need to have a director of education, like pretty much black and white. Other ones are just sort of at the whim of what the faculty wants to do or how we help them think about it. And then again, this is just that sort of division of labor idea, which is expertise and capacity, but also just where their main interest and where their main motivation is, and we support them on the education side. This is just a shot of a faculty member coming down. We've got 100 middle schoolers showing up in his building, and he just pops down from his office, does his thing, and then everything works well. In terms of the community, I don't really have to spend a huge amount of time on this because I think it's fairly well understood, but certainly strengthening the ties to schools and museums, other youth-serving organizations in the community, supporting the teacher capacity in the local schools in STEM is always a struggle. That's one of the toughest areas to have highly prepared teachers, and so most schools will say, oh, absolutely, we need as much help as we can get for our teachers. One of the things to me, as someone who does STEM education generally, is this idea of closing the gap between what we know here on campus as authentic science and what it looks like in schools, which is really often very far from what real-world science looks like. And in my view, one of the main reasons that kids don't find it that appealing to go in this direction, because it's pretty dry and not that exciting compared to what happens on labs here on campus. Obviously using grads and undergrads as role models is really exciting for young kids because they're not that far off in age. So let me just tell you a little bit about our office, just a little bit more kind of tactically here. Again, we were founded in '06. We are housed in the School of Education, although we have baseline funding from the Vice President for Research and the Dean of Education. So we kind of are shared financially by those two organizations, although we live in the School of Ed just like you live in physics. We currently have 13 total staff, including me. Beyond this sort of baseline funding level, everything else is soft money. Everything else is grant supported. So except for a fraction of the 13, everybody else on that is grant supported dollars. This is our partnership network that we've sort of grown over the years. We have somewhere around 200 schools, and about half of those, the red dots, are the City of Chicago schools, and the other ones are outside. Sometimes it matters depending on who we're talking to. And we've reached somewhere in the neighborhood of 600 teachers and coming up now on somewhere near 50,000 students that those teachers have themselves impacted, not that we serve directly, yeah.
A question about networking tools, in this case,
Yeah.
with people. Do you find that there is a particular tool that you like to use, whether it's email, LinkedIn, Facebook, that connects the teachers to your program?
Well, I wish there was an easy answer to that because it's always feels like a struggle. We grew over time, we just grew our mailing list, you know, using Constant Contact or whatever the tool is. And that's how we tend to market, you know, our offerings. We never really used a social media type tool. I mean, my experience, teachers often don't have a ton of time to spend on those environments, especially if it's one that they're not already on. And you know, some people create Facebook pages and stuff, and that often works well, though Facebook is blocked in most schools, so the teachers, even during the day, can't even get on it themselves often. So, you know, it's just very organic.
So like emails,
Email's been our primary, you know, our primary thing. We just send out a blast, or we'll work with another organization that works with teachers and ask them to send out our blast, you know, that kind of thing. So, no magic, no secret sauce there. In addition to school partnerships, we also work pretty hard to forge state and local partnerships with different state level initiatives. Some of these are Race to the Top funded things. And then other things are just, you know, civic institutions like the library system, park districts, other not-for-profits that might be interested in this area. And we just try to, you know, join forces when we can, or partner with them either formally on a grant or informally just in terms of, you know, working together on stuff. In addition, we've done a lot to kind of broaden our funding partnerships beyond just sort of going to the federal government over and over and over again. Tends not to be super successful these days. And so we've been looking out at you know, the surrounding corporate entities. In Chicago, obviously we have a bigger cross-section than here, but there's always somebody around who you know, does work in these areas and wants to give back to the community and often doesn't know how. I would say the other thing too is the idea of partnering internally, and Brian and I were actually just having a kind of a brainstorm about this beforehand, but working constructively within these different university offices that already exist and leveraging activities that are already in place, but packaging them or organizing them. Similarly with alumni giving or government relations who want to foster good relations with the city government or the state government, and to the extent that we're doing stuff with them, that helps. It ironically turned out that our office, given our work with the schools, had a closer relationship with the mayor's office in Chicago than anybody else on the campus. And so whenever they needed to know what was going on with the mayor's office, they'd come ask us. I'm like, you know, what do I look like, government relations, you know? But that was good because we really had that solid, you know, relationship that built over time. So just, oh yeah, go ahead.
Good question, and I'm thinking about, you know, where we are and where you are in terms of corporate relations. And I've seen that mishandled from the institutions.
Which one, the corporate
relations.
Yeah.
Very much so. So did you do it yourself and sort of establish that you could, and then basically turn around and said, see, we can work with us?
Yeah, we've been much more in the driver's seat on that than corporate relations folks. I mean, nominally their job is to go get corporate funders to campus, and so I'm thrilled, but I'm still waiting for them to go do that for me. Mostly it's me going after the things, and frankly, this is a whole new area for them. As I was saying, this idea of expanding the funding opportunities into K-12. Normally the corporate relations folks aren't thinking about K-12, right? They're thinking about, you know, placing undergrads or supporting faculty research, right? That's the nature of what they've been sort of trained to do. And we've been trying to go to them and say, look, we can do things in K-12 in the community through the university, so if you see opportunities where they want to do stuff with kids, we can do that here now. And they're like, oh, we never knew that before. And so we're trying to broaden their perspective so when they're out hunting for things, they can bring it to us. As I said, that's been a training effort on our part. But no, we normally go out and either apply for something or spark up a conversation. And what I would say, this is jumping ahead a little bit, but just like faculty either are required by NSF or others to do outreach, but don't know how, all that list of 8 things that I was telling you about, the challenges, companies are in the same boat, right? They often have a corporate citizenship mission, right? Or employee engagement, where they want their volunteers out there, they want to give back to the community. And if they're in a STEM-related field of some sort of engineering or whatever, and they care about that for the future workforce, they often lack the capacity in the same way that faculty do on campus. And so what we found is when they come and talk to us, we can help them through their sponsorship do programs. I'm going to give you an example of this later, much in the same way that we use our expertise on campus with faculty. And that was a big aha moment for us, because we didn't understand that, you know, even a big company like a pharmaceutical company or Google, a lot of these big companies only have like 1 or 2 people in their corporate citizenship office that have to do all of this work. Well, they don't have the capacity to deal with schools and stuff like that any more than a faculty member has a ton of that capacity. And so we were able to kind of step in and say, look, we can work together. So the original model for OSAP was, as I was describing, just to support these initiatives the faculty were generating through their proposals. That was kind of where we started. That was our origin story, if you will. Hey, I've got to write a proposal. I'm supposed to do this outreach stuff. I have no idea what to do. Can you help me? And hopefully, like I said, it was more than 3 days before the deadline, and we would say yes. Otherwise, we would throw up our hands. And so that's how we sort of started. But then over time, what we realized is that we began to grow our own projects in-house and then reach back out to the faculty to bring them into our projects. Right? Does that make sense? So I'm going to give you some examples of both of these models. And they both coexist and are very synergistic. It's not an either-or proposition. But normally, you know, this is like the default model, and then people just stop. And I want to kind of, you know, and that's what we did for the first few years, too. So basically, our work is divided into these 3 areas: teacher professional development, doing curriculum or activity or technology development, and then kind of a catch-all kind of capacity building after. Those are our big silos of work, and there's little stuff outside of there. But so for example, our teacher professional development we call the Institute for STEM Teaching and Research at Northwestern. ISTAR at NU is our catchy name. And we have something like a dozen different professional development courses, normally in the summer, because that's when teachers have the time. And teachers can come in, and we send out this email blast, and we say, hey, we've got 12 programs this summer. Which one do you want to sign up for? And if you're, you know, an astronomy person, you might sign up for the astronomy thing. And if you're a, you know, chem teacher, then you might sign up for that. And we do a number of other things, including research experiences for teachers, where they come to campus and work in a lab for some part of the summer. Or even do job shadowing, which is a little bit more lightweight, where they may just come in for a day or 2 and either shadow somebody in a lab or go out to a sponsoring company. In some cases, we'll actually follow up with one of our staff and help them coach them in their class when they do these new activities with their kids, just to make sure it goes well and they feel supported. And then later I'll tell you a little bit about some of our equipment loan programs. So over the last 4 years, we've grown from like 50 teachers now to over 300 per year that we provide professional development to. So we're growing that impact in the community. We do not charge teachers. It's a completely free offering. And normally, if you're in a school, you pay for this. You know, if you're a principal, you pay for your teachers to go get the training. So that's a pretty big benefit. And also, we're a lot cooler and more cutting edge than a lot of the sort of corporate publishers would be. And so that's our effort there. In terms of the curriculum development, like I said, there's this original model, and I'll give you a couple examples of that. And then,
question on the PD.
Yeah.
Do the districts still pay the teachers to
come over.
come over?
In the summer, typically they're off the clock. If they come during the year, then they're still being paid their salary. But like I said, most of our offerings are in the summer.
But do the districts, for example, then do the buyouts during the year so that they could come for a day?
They sometimes do buyouts.
Just getting a sense for
Yeah,
that.
yeah. That's why we try not to do it during the day. But
Even free offerings from the point of view of
Oh, yeah.
And it depends, I think, on local culture, so that's another part of the question.
That's right.
Here, teachers often want some kind of stipend for.
right. And so to the extent that we are the PD is part of the professional development, or PD, is part of an actively funded project, then we actually do give them stipends. So not only are they not paying us, but we're actually paying them. In the summer, if they come for like a research experience, absolutely they get paid for that. And if we're doing any kind of thing where we ask them to do work, like do curriculum development, we pay them as, you know, kind of summer salary type employee work. Because in our experience, those of you who work with teachers, if you don't offer that kind of payment, you don't get the best teachers to come in because they are able to, you know, do that summer employment and often need to do that summer employment. So yeah, we do that. For the programs that are kind of ongoing, we don't have funding for them anymore, so we just offer them for free. And then, you know, we're not doing research anymore, so it's just sort of a free offering. But these are the kinds of things that, again, if you go to some faculty member who's writing a grant, they'll have no idea that they need to do any of this stuff in the budget or any of that kind of stuff, because it's not in their consciousness as to, you know, oh sure, we'll just get a bunch of teachers to come in. That seems easy enough. And it's like, no, you know, there's a lot of, you know, details around, are you going to pay for their sub? Are they going to get release time? Are you going to pay them? That kind of stuff. That's a good question though. And so anyway, these are the two models. I'll just give you quickly a couple of examples just to kind of make it concrete, because I mean, we're still kind of high level. So here's a project that was actually NOAA funded, where the researchers were looking at food webs and bioaccumulation of toxics. And we created a net logo simulation for the kids to play with, where they got to play with the different population species and watch the PCB toxics accumulate up through the food web. And this is sort of a complex systems modeling kind of task that turned out to be pretty popular and fun. You know, kids like to see the fish swimming around and eating stuff, and then they change the population dynamics and see what happens. Another one we did with a faculty member in the medical school was take some biotechnology work in an area called oncofertility, which is about preserving the fertility of cancer patients, and created some high school biology lab investigations that tied, you know, kind of core content into this field of biotechnology, and the kids really enjoyed it. Some of the newer, this sort of second model are projects that, for example, I'm PI on or co-PI on. One of them is computational thinking in STEM, and we're creating different modules that fit in different high school classrooms. And we've been able to incorporate 2 early career awards from NSF into this project, because what the faculty were working on kind of fit in really nicely with computational skills. And so those faculty members got to plug into another actively funded project that we were already running. So it provided a really nice synergistic fit. Another project that we're doing out of school is called Fuse, and we have these what we call Fuse studios opened all around the city in libraries and schools. And the program consists of different challenges that the kids work on. And we've partnered with different organizations, like a local jeweler, small business, Chicago Architecture Foundation's, you know, a not-for-profit. Siemens, here's one of our corporate examples that you were going to ask about, where we created a challenge based on solar energy, solar vehicles, which is something that they're big on. And so we, you know, with their funding, we developed this challenge, and now we're out and kids are working on a challenge that has a Siemens name on it. We also collaborated with our Solar Energy Research Center on campus, so actually brought an on-campus resource and a corporate resource together to do this challenge. And then here's one with that same biotechnology lab that we worked with, and we just kind of created a fun challenge for kids out of it. So when we have these projects that we're running that are modular and we can plug in faculty that happen to relate, then they get the benefit of this ongoing funded effort that they're not paying for, but that they're piggybacking off of. All right, and then the third category, real briefly, and then we'll get to some of the kind of facts and figures, is these are all very pragmatic. You know, the teacher professional development or activities are just things that a teacher can do in his or her classroom. But we also work to help districts or schools kind of grow their overall capacity. And so here's a course, an online course, where if a school or district wants to start a program to support students doing their own research projects, science research projects, we can put them through our course that sort of helps them think through how to create the program in their school, what are different models, and so it's not a specific curriculum, but it's just an overall effort that they can go through to create new opportunities. And since it's an online course, we actually have teachers from New Jersey, Ohio, California, and Missouri who are, signing on and going through this course, and then they go back and design a program for their own school. Some of the kind of more basic things that we do too is we have a bunch of laptops and Chromebooks and things that we've accumulated over time and other kits, and we loan these out to teachers who want to do something in the class, but either they don't have enough computers or they just don't want to drag down to the computer lab, and so we'll loan them out stuff in their class. And we also do some recycling, if you will, of used lab equipment from our labs, and we try to get stuff that's reasonable out into the community when they need it. And we just had a whole computer lab that the library was just getting rid of, and we went to the high school and we said, "You guys want a new computer lab?" And they're like, "Sure." And so they have 25 not new Dells, but reasonable Dells that they get to use. And we have a lot more we could do here. It's really hard to get the whole campus to pay attention to the idea of, hey, you've got this kind of old piece of equipment. We could actually make good use of it in one of these schools. Let's get it out there. We talked about this sort of growing network of 600 teachers. There are a couple of models that we also do where we really focus in depth on a particular school. And we place, in these cases, a partnership coordinator who's one of my staff in that school on a half-time or full-time basis. So we don't do this very often because it's a pretty resource-intensive proposition, but that's when we really drill down and focus deeply on a particular school. So one of them in Chicago, which is called the Lindblom Math and Science Academy, we support a biotechnology center of excellence where they train teachers on doing biotech in their classrooms, and we support them by doing professional development and other kinds of things. And we have one of my staff who is a PhD in molecular biology who spends half her time in that school running these professional development sessions and other things. So it's a really intensive, in-depth commitment. Our local high school, which is like 6 blocks down the road from campus, is Evanston Township. And we've, through the president of the university, really invested deeply in strengthening the ties with that local high school. And they have this good neighbors, great partners branding that we've used. Now they even put it up on the flagpoles out on the street, which was kind of cool. And we have a purple office in the high school, a Northwestern office that looks like this. This is the president, the superintendent, and the mayor at the ribbon cutting. And then a full-time partnership coordinator from my office that's staffed in the high school full-time and does nothing but support the STEM teachers in terms of their teaching, but also just does matchmaking and coordination efforts between everything that's going on campus, not just in STEM, and stuff at the high school. So there's sort of like a clearinghouse. Those old hotel operators with the little cables, right? That's kind of like, in my mind, that's what she does. She's like, plugs this cable in there and that cable in there, and then kind of gets out of the way and lets those folks do their work. And there's all kinds of stuff. So we had
What's the funding for that position?
that one came from the president's office, because that was like a commitment that he wanted to make with the mayor to the local high school. And so it's kind of a special case, non-scalable solution, but is representative of a way that we helped the president realize his vision for partnering locally with the schools and gave that person a home in the university, in my office, to kind of report up to and be supported institutionally, as opposed to just this random person that lived somewhere off campus who didn't know who to talk to. So it actually worked out really well, because if she needs something, she can come back up through me or into campus and get support. So like I said, these are kind of unique, very in-depth models, and it's hard to know exactly how to scale them, but I also wanted to show that it isn't just the bring one teacher in, give them PD and send them back, that often you can forge these deeper ties with the community. I should say that this one is funded by Baxter. So This one is not internally funded, it's externally funded. So there's different ways to kind of cook it, depending on how you do it. So we had a GK-12, we put a bunch of our grad students in that high school. The women in science engineering undergrads would go over there and do a lot of mentoring with the girls in the high school. We do, twice a year, we do what we call Kits and Cats. Kits is, the Wild Kits is their mascot, and a Wild Cat is our mascot. So Kits and Cats. And we bring the sophomores and juniors who are not that convinced that they want to even go to college. So these are not the A+ students, but we work with their college counseling office to find those kids that are waffling. And we bring them to campus, and they get to meet the football team. And you know, it's not just academics, but just like, hey, check out the dorms, and really give them a great experience. Some in the labs and some just around campus. We actually moved, we had an on-campus scientific images contest that we run every year at the university. AAAS does this nationally, and we actually moved the whole exhibit to the high school and put it up in the lobby there so the kids would, you know, get exposed to it. So little things like that, but if you keep at it and you keep bundling it and throwing all your resources, pretty soon you're having a pretty big impact. We started to kind of centrally manage all the undergrad tutoring that was going on at the high school, because like there's sororities and fraternities and student groups, and they're all doing tutoring, and we didn't have any idea what was going on. And now we have kind of a training program for the tutors, and we can count them, and we know who's, you know, scheduling for what. They can sign up for only the things that they care about, and we just kind of rationalize the whole effort. Okay, so that's perfect timing. Now down into the weeds in terms of like what the transaction volume sort of looks like here. So for those of you who don't really care about this, I apologize, but some people, these are the best slides in the whole deck. So this is the last almost 5 years. This isn't a full year yet. In terms of the number of proposals that we do, and so the red are the ones that we generate ourselves, and the blue are the ones that come from faculty, you know, outside asking for our help. And so basically what you see here is we're doing something around 2 proposals a month, every month on average. And in terms of awarded ones, we're not, this is only a partial year, so we're actually not doing too bad in terms of the ones that actually come in. We do somewhere between $20 and $40 million a year of grant volume, which doesn't mean that we're generating, but we're participating in it. And a lot of those big numbers come from those center grants that I was telling you about, which are about 20 million a pop. So if you have 2 or 3 of them, then those are pretty big numbers. And so, you know, the green is our overall success rate, and the red is the ones that we generate ourselves, which is sometimes a little higher, sometimes lower. But compared to, I think, the NSF rate of about 10% now, right? 8, 9, 10%, it's not high. We're not doing too bad. We're about 3 times that average, although a lot of this goes into corporate stuff, which is a higher hit rate. But nonetheless, not too bad. So here's the business case slide for you, Brian. If you look at the red, which is the cumulative internal funding that the university gives to us, we're returning about 10x in terms of grant dollars on the university investment, right? And this is the ROI is the way the divisor, dividing those two together. So obviously it goes up and down, but and then as a percent of our total revenues, the internal dollars, you know, went from about 20% down to about 10% of our total money. So about 90% is stuff we're bringing in, and about 10% is stuff that the university is giving to us. So I think that makes a pretty strong case, at least in terms of research activity. This is a little bit technical, but those of you who follow these things will understand it. So this is the internal cumulative dollars that we brought in, and this is just the overhead on the grants that we brought in. So even if you just look at the overhead generated, we're still paying for ourselves over time using just that metric alone. So this is the slide where we look at kind of the diversification. The red is federal, which is either usually NSF or NIH dollars. And you can see, we went from pretty much all red back here, and we've really worked pretty hard to kind of spread it out and go to different sources, yeah.
Is that, is the red portion just that chunk of the NSF grant that is allocated to?
Yes, just that portion,
Okay.
not the
You're
total.
not counting all
This is only the money that comes in to my office. So it's either the full amount that I write as a PI or that little sliver that gets peeled off from the big grant, right? Not the 25 million, I'm not counting that here. On the previous slide I was.
Has your office done something to change corporate involvement?
Yeah, we worked pretty hard to grow the corporate dollars.
So,
Yeah, this is cumulative, I'm sorry, yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. It makes for a bigger slope. when you do cumulative. Yeah, they should teach a class on making convincing graphs, right? Anyway, so this is just the diversification of funding, which I think is important because you put all your eggs in one basket, it's not good. And frankly, the corporations and other foundations are often less competitive for funding than like an NSF thing. So you're in better shape, I think, if you do that. So so that was kind of the number snapshot. I'm happy to go over more of that or just Q&A. But basically, this is kind of that takeaway slide again. And I think you can also look at this kind of like as a megaphone or bullhorn or something. You can really amplify the impact of the on-campus resources if you have an office like STEMCorps that's thinking about how do we take all the assets that we have on campus, which is a pretty substantial but distributed and not organized set of resources, and think about how to align them and make them work for that. So you have all these undergrads that are doing lots of great things. Are they channeled and directed in strategic ways? Sometimes yes, sometimes often no. And if you do a little bit of channeling, you get a lot of free labor and you can still have a pretty big impact. And I guess as a takeaway, what I'd suggest in terms of how you think about this is think about STEMCorps as a platform. And by platform, I mean something like the App Store on your phone or on iTunes, right? Which is this great infrastructure. And if you write a new app, you've got an undergrad or a high school student and crank out a new app, you don't have to invent the whole App Store. You just upload your thing to the App Store, and then hundreds of millions of consumers worldwide can download your app and purchase it, and you don't have to worry about credit card transactions or how it even gets downloaded. It's all set up for you. And you just sit on top of that platform and get all this functionality basically for free. And really that's kind of a way to think about how this kind of office can function is as a platform that faculty and other efforts can sit on top of and then leverage a big infrastructure that, or a powerful, not big, but at least a powerful infrastructure. It lowers the barriers to participation because you don't feel like you have to do everything all by yourself from scratch, which is really pretty daunting. And it delivers more capability, as I was saying. You've got this existing set of people, of experts. My office is full of curriculum developers, former teachers, science education experts who know how to do this stuff and train teachers, and they're available to work on these projects. And so you can also think of what we've done as creating a kind of a distribution network, which is the other way to think of like the App Store. And so we've got this network of teachers, and so when we do something, we can get it out to a lot more people, a lot more teachers, a lot more students and schools than a faculty member could do his or herself. And we can also kind of be a repository for all of these good artifacts and programs and models and keep them going year after year, even if the faculty has moved on to other things. Mostly the lights just get shut off on these things, which is frankly a real shame. But there's no reason you couldn't keep offering them if there was a mechanism with a little bit of funding to keep doing that. And then, like I said, we can aggregate and do packaging of different things together so you create these nice bundles for teachers and students in a way that wasn't possible before. And so what I'll leave you with is where Brian and I were in DC together recently is there's now a new national network called Bionic, which we've formed, which strings together you guys are actually on the map, of offices like STEMCorps and OSAP all around the country. And everyone has a different name and they live in different parts of their own university. to kind of support the growth and networking of these kinds of efforts around the country. And so that's a really exciting development. And like I said, it's just going to help provide training, capacity development. Like once the grant starts up, it might fund this kind of a visit by me to you or by some other expert to a brand new university that wants to start something to help grow and advise and support each other in this kind of a way. So that was really the idea. It can also be very tactical in the sense of just, boy, we have this multi-institution grant. I need to know somebody at University of Puerto Rico because there's another PI over there that's on this grant. How do we do our broader impacts together? Now we know, because now we'll have this network, which we already do. In fact, I just used it for a couple of grants that went in because we had Stanford on there, and I said, well, actually, I know the Stanford person. So I could email her and say, hey, we want to do X, Y, or Z for this proposal, and they're like, oh, yeah, we're in. And so it just stitches that part together really well, just like a scientific society would stitch together scientific collaboration. So, so that's really about it. And I'm glad to take any questions or talk about whatever details I went by too fast.
Yeah, in one of your earliest slides, I noticed that your College of Ed and your research office, I guess, provided you with
Yeah.
the seed funding or the
Baseline
whatever
funding,
you
yep.
needed to get launched. And at least last time I looked, neither of those units on our campus is participating at all. And here it's coming entirely out of arts and sciences.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering, do you have arts and sciences participation? And
Not at the school level.
okay.
But it is interesting because I would say my experience, like one of my colleagues at Wisconsin, he lives in the life sciences school. You know, so I would say it's more the rule than the exception that these things live in just random places in every different university for no particular logical, you know, or consistent reason. So sometimes they live in the provost's office, which you'd think would make sense, but often if it's more grassroots, I would say the larger universities, the state schools, tend to have, they're so big that they tend to bubble up and have these clusters in like arts and sciences or College of Life Sciences or whatever the case might be. So, but it's very heterogeneous, very, very.
Are they more effective than others?
We don't know. I mean, part of what we're hoping this Bionic network would do would get us to a point of saying like, well, best practices tends to be to have it here, not there. But we just don't know. I mean, we're so early in this. Like the fact that we're even discovering who we all, I mean, you can't even Google each other because we're all called something different. You know, like there's no easy way to know who these guys are, or where they, you know, or even what part of the website to go look for. It's really pretty confusing, so.
So, thinking your brain more about the national picture, do you know of anybody who, it would probably be in public, so I know that it doesn't sound like it's you, where the housing is actually more integrated with K-12. So for example, K-12 have curriculum leaders, or you know, they might have if they're a big enough district, wealthy enough districts, they'll have a science specialist. Mm-hmm. Where, for example, the science specialist is sort of physically in some kind of thing where you've got to integrate it, you know, or it could be housed at the district, but then university employees are working in some office at the district.
Yeah.
It's integrated at that level.
Right.
Do you-
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought that, you know, we have that model where we have a person in the school.
Yeah.
But I've always thought that having somebody at a district would also be really effective in terms of supporting the capacity and planning at the district. But we've never been able to do that. The closest that we have is just this relationship with the mayor's office, which in Chicago is basically the one that runs the schools, like in most big cities, right? New York and other things. You can say it's the school district, but it's really the mayor's office that calls the shots, right? Which took us a long time to learn, actually. You know, like we kept going there, and then they, like, you know, they'd have a new superintendent. We wouldn't know anybody anymore. It'd be turnover. So, but no, I think it's a good idea.
But do you know of anybody who's actually working along those lines?
I don't. The closest would be like the math science partnership models that NSF funds, where you have to have the district and the university like co-PIs on the thing. But I don't know if anybody physically housing it like that. I mean, we just do it by basically just close collaboration with, you know, a superintendent or whatever. Like I have monthly meetings with the Evanston superintendent and our partnership coordinator, where we sit down every month and we say, like, what's going on? How's the office going? You know, any big deals coming up that we should work on together? So at least we have that kind of a monthly kind of check-in. So how are we doing on time, Brian?
I want to thank Kemi.
Thank you for
Thank you too for inviting me.
Yeah, no, it was really my pleasure. Yeah.